am the kid movie ninja.
Floyd, high internet!
And welcome to Kid Movie Ninja with your hosts, Fighting Leaf and Husky the Wolf. Well, we, recently hijacked someone's Disney Plus account.
And it's friggin' sweet!
Now I can finally get to talking about all those Lion Guard episodes we've been wanting to cover forever. But before we do that, we do want to address what is possibly the show's most important obstacle to overcome.
And we're gonna do it by talking about one specific character.
And so, without further ado, we'll be exploring the character arc of the new leader of the crocodiles, Makuu.
There's 3 episodes in particular we want to cover. The first one is Season 1's Rise of Makuu.
It starts off deliberately ho-hum and utilizes its secondary plot, the fact that Bunga is too smelly to do his job effectively.
Even though it affected literally nothing, but whatever.
And we'll be ignoring it from now on because it's annoying.
Yay!
Anyway, they use this B-plot to lead the Lion Guard to Big Springs. This is where we meet the crocodiles for the first time, led by the wise old Pua, voiced by Gerald C. Rivers.
See, when there's too many fish in Big Springs, the hippos invite the crocs over to cut down their numbers.
But if there aren't enough fish in Big Springs, the crocodiles have to move along.
Yeah, guess what the problem is in this episode?
This is where we meet the character we'll be analyzing today, the ambitious young upstart Makuu, voiced by Blair Underwood.
He don't like taking orders from hippos, so he declares a Mashindano! Which honestly sounds like a Starbucks order.
Okay, I'd like to start with a vanilla latte. And could you put cinnamon on top of that? I really like that. Alright, and after that, a frappuccino for Rugburn and a cinnamon Mashindano. The Mashindano is a combat trial used to determine crocodile leadership. Whoever surrenders needs to leave the float forever, and the challenger takes over.
So, Black Panther.
Yeah, pretty much. Kion is appalled by this custom, but the Mashindano takes place all the same at sunset. What follows is a rather intense fight scene for a Y7 cartoon. And that right there is the start of this show's issues, now that Husky and I have had a chance to see more of it.
There's nothing wrong with being a kiddie show. Heck, we like kiddie shows. But they got a lot of restrictions on them that other programs don't. That being said, this fight scene is friggin' cool. Heavy impact, snapping teeth. They may not show any blood in this show, but they let the animals act like animals here.
Within reason, of course. Ultimately, though, Pua's superior technique can't compete with Makuu's strength and stamina, and Makuu wins the Mashindano. And what's the first thing that Makuu does with his new position of leadership and responsibility?
Eat fish! Specifically, he muscles his way into Big Springs, forcing out the hippos, which forces out the elephants, forcing out the zebras, and blah blah, everything is borked.
Part of the Lion Guard's duty to keep their ecosystem in working order, and large shifts like this are a big no-no. But when they go off to confront Makuu about this, Makuu shows a complete lack of respect for anything but his own dominance. This is Makuu's starting point. Leadership to him is just an opportunity to show off how strong you are.
It's about subjecting other people to your will and making them do what you want. Survival of the fittest.
Yes, the lesson he teaches Kion about standing up to bullies and whatnot is important, but that's not what this video is about. This is about Makuu's journey, not Kion's, and yet even now we see glints of the kind of potential that Makuu has.
Kion goes over to visit Pua, the old croc leader, and while most of his advice isn't super helpful, he drops this gem.
But that doesn't make him a better leader than you.
True, but he's young. He can learn.
This idea of non-static characters is a bit of a departure from the kinds of shows that Husky and I grew up watching in our youth. Sure, change happened, but this was long before streaming and binge-watching was a thing.
Writers couldn't count on their audiences watching every episode in order. Heck, they couldn't even count on releasing them in order, so there was no point in giving characters permanent change and stuff.
Now, this revelation of Pua's is not really a big deal. In fact, Husky and I dismissed it outright when we first watched it. But the fact is, the show delivers on the promise that he makes.
But this guy's journey is just getting started. Force is the only thing he respects yet.
And Kion obliges.
Blowing away everything in an empty grove of trees, he shows that Makuu can't possibly beat him. So he finally backs down and behaves.
The last thing that happens here is the leader of the hippos extending the same invitation to eat fish later that he'd extended to their previous leader.
Again, it's a small action, but it's important.
He's not really learning his lessons just yet, but those seeds of redemption have already been planted. Even so, they're not yet ready to grow.
The next episode of our list, Never Roar Again, is about Kion losing control of that big roar he used to keep Makuu on his best behavior and not wanting to use it anymore.
Of course, word gets back to Makuu because Bunga has no volume control, and he takes this opportunity to take over not just Big Springs, but a more important area called the Floodplains. It's here where Makuu kind of looks like he's gonna take on the role of just ordinary recurring villain like the vultures or hyenas and whatnot. And that is kind of how it goes for a while.
Yeah, change don't happen overnight. Sometimes you gotta keep hammering the bad ideas out of people's heads until better ones come in and take their place.
And that's exactly what happens here. Kion regains his confidence and even more control over the roar than before, which I honestly hope they use again at some point, but I'm not holding my breath, to humble Makuu a second time, driving him back to his float's usual spot.
Again and again it happens. Beaten in Beshti in the hippo lanes, and again in Ono the tick bird. He learns over and over that his strong-arm tactics don't get him anywhere. And that's when we get into Season 2.
Season 2 is an instant improvement over Season 1, especially how they handle Bunga's character. But the episode we're going to be covering here is actually one Husky and I have difficulty with.
The Savannah Summit.
By now, Kion and the audience have been trained to see Makuu as a sneaky, conniving thug with no respect for anyone else. But remember those seeds planted in Season 1?
What do you think happens when the thing you try to do fails over and over again?
In the case of Janja, you just keep failing and never learn. But there's something Makuu said back in Season 1 that shows that he's cut from different stuff than Janja.
No meal is worth this. Forget it.
He ain't stubborn enough to keep chasing after something when it ain't working, especially when someone shows him a different way.
Which is exactly what King Simba does in this episode.
When the guard first finds Makuu approaching Pride Rock, Kion tackles him to the ground, only for his dad to be like, "Dude, chill, I invited him, jeez."
The problem with reviewing this episode is that Husky and I have difficulty just sitting through it.
You know how we talked about how My Little Pony episodes were always super predictable?
That's exactly the problem going on here. Kion keeps looking for evidence of Makuu causing trouble, keeps being wrong, rinse and repeat. And what makes the problem worse is that we completely understand why he would make these kinds of mistakes over and over again.
Kion's suspicions are completely understandable. Everything that Makuu has done up until this point has made him look like a complete utter jerk.
We just hate watching heroes floundering around with the same problem over and over again when the solution is obvious.
And what is that answer? Tell it, dead grandpa!
Rafiki has a saying about reaching conclusions too quickly.
Leap to conclusions and you leap to confusions.
Armed with this new understanding, Kion and the crew catch wind of a super vague plot involving Makuu.
However, rather than jump to still more conclusions, Kion thinks through the events of the day and concludes that Makuu isn't the perpetrator, but the target. Yeah, it's technically out of character for him at this point, but Makuu has done nothing but try his best to cooperate with the other animals during this summit.
And he gets a pit full of rotten fruit for his troubles.
It's not that rotten.
No, seriously, that was the plot. A couple of other animals dug a big hole and filled it with rotten fruit so that he'd stink during the rest of the summit.
Sheesh, talk about weak sauce herbivore scheming. But lucky for them, Makuu doesn't feel like ripping him to shreds because part of him still thinks like a bad guy and can respect a good underhanded trick. Even if it is noob level.
All in all, this transformation was possible because somebody gave him a chance to be better than he was. And, like we said, this was foreshadowed all the way back in Season 1, where we very first met him.
But we ain't done yet. there's one last step to his redemption arc, and that's proving that it's gonna stick.
This is done by having history repeat itself, but with a rather different outcome. Season 2 takes the Pride Lands into the dry season when rainfall is scarce and food of all kind is hard to find.
So the Lion Guard is out doing their normal thing, stopping an antelope stampede, yada yada. But when Ono, voiced by Atticus Schaefer, suggests leading them into a ravine, the herd's loud stomping wakes up the crocodiles.
The show teaches us that because crocodiles need a lot of water to survive, they usually spend the dry season in hibernation.
But if anything wakes them up, they can't just go back to sleep.
That means that this little strategy of Ono's may have stopped the stampede, but it has caused a much bigger problem.
One croc in particular, Kiburi, voiced by... Common?
Lonnie Rashid Lynn Jr. Common is just his rapper name.
Whatever. Kiburi is particularly upset because he's just generally a jerk, and Makuu keeps having to rein him in over and over throughout the scene.
Yes, this time it's Makuu who's keeping someone else from flying off the handle.
Makuu just wants to figure out how to get water for his float, using legitimate means.
But Kiburi keeps stepping out of line.
Smack talking the Lion Guard.
Disobeying a direct order.
Until finally he's had enough and calls for another Mashindano!
3 chocolate cake pops and a blueberry Agni Kai, please.
You know, that ritual that started this whole mess in the first place?
But, unlike Pua, Makuu is not some aged, wise old croc who can't fight well enough. Also, this episode takes place after the rise of Scar, so that means...
Be prepared!
Without going into a lot of detail, because that's not what this video's about, Scar sends the Cobra Ushari to convince Kiburi to make an attempt on Simba, the king's life, using the Mashindano as a cover.
That fails, of course, and when he and his croc cronies are banished to the Outlands, Scar's got some new soldiers in his ever-growing army.
The episode ends with Makuu forgiving Ono for his mistake, ushering in a new crocodile wave.
The arc is complete with Kiburi taking Makuu's place as Resident Evil Crocodile, allowing him to take on a new role.
It's not a perfect transition, unfortunately, because there were not enough intermediate stages in Season 1, but it's still important for the show's development because it teaches that people can change if they want to.
That's right, they just gotta be given a chance.
Even so, not everyone will. There are plenty of unrepentant villains left in the show, but Makuu's growth shows that there is hope for the Pride Lands, even in the face of the return of Scar.
Feels good to talk more about this show, it's actually a lot of fun.
As much fun as it is, the show still has that major flaw holding it back from being a masterpiece. And that's the fact that it's a Y7 show that has the potential to be so much more. The show has this big, lived-in world with so much potential for character growth and expansion, but it needs to be kept into a Y7 box. That's what really frustrates people about it.
It's not a bad show by any means, but people can just see the potential for it to be so much more. But nobody wants to make it that.
It's another issue about the kinds of audiences a show attracts. It's meant for little kids, but it's got the potential to be so much more. So much more.
Hey guys, time for a Patreon shout here. This one goes out to Shammy, Bashful Ivory, Joyful Cryptid, Megan Cloud, and Sonic Destroyer 12. Thanks a lot for your continued support. The music we use on the channel was made by Steve Sharp. We have a link to his YouTube channel in the description. Go give him a listen, I'm sure he'd appreciate it. And last but not least, if you want to send us any fan mail, send it to P.O. Box 82 40059. Thanks a lot, guys. Later!
And can I also get one straight black coffee, please? That's like a cup of coffee without anything in it.